If I'm not talking loudly enough, please let me know. Tonight's talk, I'm going to be talking about the difference between secular mindfulness and Buddhist mindfulness. I thought that would be interesting to explore those differences. So I don't think one is better than another. I'm just going to tell you that right off the bat. Okay. People have their preferences, and I'll tell you which one is slated to do what. You know, the marketing pitch for each one. But I want to start with a bit of a joke. What did the mindfulness meditation teacher say to the businessman when teaching him meditation? I want you to take 3 deep, slow breaths, and then very slowly let go of your cell phone. Anyone holding on to their cell phone? Anyhow. So secular mindfulness has been plucked out of Buddhism to make it palatable to the average modern culture human being. And in recent years, particularly the past 10 years, but over 20 years, a lot of psychotherapists have adopted this Buddhist practice of mindfulness, the secular part, as part of their therapeutic toolkit to help people. Today we hear of mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's been really popularized. And mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and there's mindfulness-based somatic experiencing, and all kinds of mindfulness-based therapies now that work really well for a lot of people, treating a lot of conditions like ADHD, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, PTSD, you name it. Mindfulness is being slated as a antidote for, or at least support for a lot of things. So the big controversy lately, I don't know if you've heard about it, that it was a big article in Tricycle, and it was on the Facebook and all over the place, was about how this woman, actually, I forgot her name, she wrote a book that is saying that mindfulness is religious and it's dangerous and it shouldn't be taught in schools because it's religious. And she's saying because it's from Buddhism, it's religious. I haven't read the book. Anyone read the book? Well, she's been on getting a lot of press lately, I guess, as part of her marketing strategy to sell her book, Why Mindfulness is Religious. So she's a lot of people that are complaining that mindfulness is Buddhism, right? And I teach at a recovery center, and some people believe it's witchcraft or it's, the work of the devil, and they don't want to be in my mindfulness class because they're religious. From their religion, they think it's a negative thing. So there's a lot of controversy from the standard lay people, and then the mindfulness practitioners. A lot of them have judgments against Buddhism, the mindfulness in Buddhism. And then Buddhism, a lot of Buddhist scholars and Buddhist people have judgments against the mindfulness movement. They call it McMindfulness. Have you heard that expression? Yeah. And a lot of Buddhist teachers complain that secular mindfulness leaves out a lot of important parts or points that Buddhism teaches, like ethical conduct and wisdom and the Noble Eightfold Path. This is Rebecca Crane from Bangor Center for Mindfulness. She says, as in all cross-cultural marriages, both sets of parents have some concerns. But I teach secular mindfulness, and I see a lot of crossover benefits. In fact, when I first started meditating, I didn't know anything about Buddhism. I started just with mindfulness. And I was meditating every day. I was suffering from really high anxiety, and I was looking for ways to heal the high anxiety. And in a psychology book, they were saying this thing called mindfulness meditation has been known to reduce anxiety. So I started wanting to learn more about it, and that's how I got into it. But what my experience was, I practiced for a good 5 or 6 years intensely until I found out it was even part of a Buddhist practice. I didn't know it came from Buddhism. And then when I started studying Buddhism, I realized, oh, I had already experienced this through my meditation practice. So I was learning experientially embodying the Noble Eightfold Path through daily intensive meditation practice. I was already realizing the wisdom that comes from what, Buddhism is pointing to, all these wonderful benefits you get, whereas I was experiencing them just from meditating, mindfulness meditation, without the Buddhist trappings. So that's probably why I have the bias that I have, because I came in through the mindfulness doorway, and then I eventually scooted into the Buddhism. Secular mindfulness is used by professionals, particularly in corporations and a lot of businesses, to increase productivity and for people to get along better in the workplace. It's in hospitals. It's in Google, right? You can find a lot of great videos on YouTube videos online, because Google brings in a lot of famous Buddhist mindfulness and/or mindfulness teachers. But the mindfulness practice, secular mindfulness, is popularized, and it promises 3 things if you look at the marketing. And it promises for stress reduction, reduce anxiety, and lessen pain. Because there's enough research, double-blind placebo studies to show that these are repeatable, that it does these 3 things for sure. So this is Jon Kabat-Zinn. He's the one that popularized mindfulness-based stress reduction. He was on a retreat at Insight Meditation Center in Barre, Massachusetts in 1979. He was on an intensive retreat, and he asked himself this question: how can I take the heart of something as meaningful as Buddha Dharma and bring it into the world in a way that doesn't dilute, profane, or distort it, but at the same time is not locked into a culturally and tradition-bound framework that would make it absolutely impenetrable to the vast majority of people who are nevertheless suffering and might find it extraordinarily useful and liberative? Liberative? Yeah. So this led him to pluck out this practice out of Buddhism and start teaching it. It eventually exploded into a popularized movement. When I first started meditating in 1985, people didn't know about mindfulness. The word wasn't known. I was pretty shocked when mindfulness became a big deal. I was like, oh, okay. So this is Jon Kabat-Zinn. This is his secular MBSR definition of mindfulness. It's awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. He describes mindfulness as an open, non-judgmental, accepting awareness of your internal and external experience, and I say especially your internal one. Because most of us are more aware of our external experience than our internal. When we're mindful, we are learning in MBSR. I haven't taken MBSR, but I've read enough about it. Maintaining, anyone here taken MBSR? Well, you're practicing meditation, obviously, but this moment by moment awareness of your thoughts, your feelings, your bodily sensations, and your surrounding environment. So Jon Kabat-Zinn, the secular movement, says mindfulness also involves acceptance. Acceptance. Meaning that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them, without believing. For instance, For instance, if there's a right or a wrong way to think or feel in any given moment. This is a mindfulness teacher. He said that he asked a friend of his, "Hey buddy, do you want to learn mindfulness? Do you want me to teach you mindfulness?" His buddy said, "Nope." And he said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Mindfulness? That's crazy. My mind is already full enough." Should I repeat that? Or wasn't that funny, was it? I thought it was. So Buddhism in itself is a paradigm or a system that provides us with a path to free us from suffering, from any kind of suffering, right? And when we're free from the suffering, we experience a lot more joy, a lot more presence, certainly freedom, and contentment, peace, a lot of peace. And the Buddha taught in his paradigm or system that this suffering starts in the mind, mental suffering, arises out of what he called ignorance or delusion. And ignorance is not seeing reality as it is clearly, right? It's a misunderstanding of the nature of reality from moment to moment because we're not seeing it as it is, both mentally and physically. In Buddhism, wise mindfulness called samasati or sati, S-A-T-I, that's the Pali term. It's the main skill that we use throughout the entire Buddhist path to penetrate through these delusions, this ignorance that frees us from the suffering. So it's our vehicle that we use, the primary vehicle that we use. Sati is presence. In Buddhism, it's awareness. But what I found really interesting, it's also to remember, to recollect, to remember. So when I open my eyes and I look over here, I see a woman. Oh, I know it's a woman because I remember, I've already learned what a female looks like, perhaps, right? I recognize this as a whiteboard because I know what whiteboards are. So there's a level of recognition, remembering. We have to have that information already stored in our mind, right? And we're also recollecting it. That we not only recognize it, but we know it because we know it in our awareness from things that are in relationship to this thing. So I know that there's chalkboards and whiteboards, and we write on these. We don't write on the other boards. So there's all this field. It's not just seeing a board, it's seeing everything that this board represents in our mind, right? So it's a broader, more expansive understanding of our present moment. And we also see the relative value of the board through this recognition. Yeah. So the Buddha taught that we're supposed to bring mindfulness to each factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is the prescription to end suffering. Mindfulness is one of the 8 factors. So we're supposed to bring mindfulness to the wisdom portion of the path, to the ethics or ethical morality portion of the path, as well as the meditation training part of the path. And there are a lot of quotes on that. You can find them all over the web. Both modalities stress the continuation of awareness from moment to moment to moment. And it's not just reserved, so mindfulness is not just reserved for that time that we sit every day for our meditation practice. We're supposed to try to bring it to each moment, whether we're sitting, lying down, standing, walking, talking, using body body, speech, or mind. Anytime we're in action with any of those, answering the telephone, responding to emails, eating, watching the television, you name it. Buddhism also teaches us the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you want to really jump into Buddhism and the mindfulness, it's called the Satipatthana Sutta. It's really intensive. It's talking about the establishment of mindfulness in these 4 different arenas. But in there, sati, mindfulness, is talked about as to maintain awareness of reality, whereby the true nature of phenomena can be seen. The true nature of phenomena can be seen. So there's this penetrating quality to seeing clearly. And not just ceasing, but it can penetrate. And this is one of the quotes in the Satipatthana Sutta. And what is right mindfulness, the Buddha asks? There is the case where one remains focused on the body, in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. One remains focused on feelings in and of themselves, the mind in and of itself, mental qualities in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. This is called wise mindfulness, or right mindfulness. So we're putting aside greed and distress. We're putting aside the clinging, wanting. We're seeing things clearly without wanting or without distress, meaning without pushing away. So there's an equilibrium, a balanced state where that's not here or here energetically. So there's a lot to the Buddhist description of mindfulness. And he says in the Satipatthana Sutta, and this, my friends, is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and distress, for the attainment of liberation. So on one hand, secular mindfulness is taught as stress reduction, reducing anxiety, and lessening pain, whereas Buddhism is teaching us how to become free from suffering to attain liberation. So there are 2 different come-froms there. Buddhism, we're supposed to have mindfulness of the body, physical form, right? Establishing awareness of the physical form, the predominant sensations, like we did in the meditation practice. Mindfulness of, does anyone know what the second one is?
The mind.
The
mind.
Mind is one of them. What's the other one?
Emotion.
Yep, emotions is one of them.
Sensations. Sensations.
Sensations, that's part. You guys are good. Okay, so mindfulness of the body includes the physical sensations. Mindfulness of feelings is the second one. Feeling tones, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Mindfulness of the thinking mind includes thoughts, beliefs, concepts, thinking, emotions. Is it part of the whole thinking mind? And the last one, mindfulness of dhammas or phenomena, includes a whole bunch of things. The hindrances, the 5 hindrances, the 5 aggregates, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 4 noble truths with the Noble Eightfold Path. So basically the entire Buddhist path is something we're supposed to bring mindfulness to. I think it's really interesting. Mindfulness of feelings or feeling tones, that's just pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, no emotions yet. So we have an experience. One of our 5 senses has stimuli, it's an experience, and then we immediately experience as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, right? If we're mindful of something pleasant, we can be with it, see, oh, there's a song. Well, this is really pleasant. then we're not going to proliferate into clinging, craving, attachment, having to have it be a certain way. We're like, okay, whoa, this is unpleasant. It's temporary. We're not going to get caught in the pushing it away, trying to get rid of it. We won't exaggerate. Anybody ever exaggerate things and create entire new distressful universes out of something unpleasant? Yeah. So we won't exaggerate, we won't panic, and we won't conflate if we can be mindfully present with something unpleasant. And then if we do exaggerate, panic, or conflate, then we're able to be aware of that as well, bring our mindfulness to that. If we're mindful of the neither pleasant nor unpleasant, the neutral, what's the benefit of that?
Stop being deluded.
Okay, great, stop being deluded.
We get a break.
We get a break. We can actually experience some peace, right? Yeah, the neither pleasant nor unpleasant is usually very peaceful. So we might experience some peace. We won't get bored. We won't become apathetic or spaced out. And we'll be able to see things clearly. We'll still be able to maintain our mindfulness. And this will reduce our suffering. Both forms of mindfulness practice are skillful means that enable us to get beneath the outer surface of our experience, to see what's going on under the currents. Both forms, we're able to see with mindfulness certain emotions that are clouding our minds, and then we'll see the habitual thinking that's feeding these emotions. We'll see these habits of reacting or overreacting to things that are no longer serving us, right? So they'll allow us to see the truth of what is happening. Oh, it's just rain. I'm making up all this stuff against rain. You know, I'm going to have an accident, I hate this weather, last time, you know, my car slipped, I might fall, you know, all that stuff that people might do. We see all that and we stop these habits that create stress for us. All right. A doctor, a lawyer, a little boy, and a priest were out for a Sunday afternoon flight on a small private plane. You may have heard this one. Suddenly the plane developed engine trouble. In spite of the best efforts of the pilot, the plane started to go down. Finally, the pilot grabbed a parachute and yelled to the passengers that they'd better jump, and he himself bailed out. Unfortunately, there were only 3 parachutes remaining. The doctor grabbed one and said, "I'm a doctor, I save lives, so I have to live," and jumped out. The lawyer then said, "I'm a lawyer, and lawyers are the smartest people in the world. I deserve to live." He grabbed a parachute and jumped out. The priest looked at the little boy and said, "My son, I've lived a long and full life. You are young and have your whole life ahead of you. Take the last parachute and live in peace." The little boy handed the parachute back to the priest and said, "Not to worry, Father. The smartest man in the world just took off with my backpack." Yeah. One of the hardest things to be mindful of is the thinking mind. Our beliefs, our concepts, our fears. It takes a lot of practice to really see our thoughts and our perceptions, the way we're skewing things or the way we're expecting people to act certain ways, and then when they don't, getting angry and making up stories. But it's really important to do this practice and have a commitment to mindfulness of the thinking mind. So, secular Buddhism does not include necessarily teachings on the hindrances, the aggregates, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. But I have to tell you, I've taught every single one of those to my recovery people without them realizing it's Buddhism. So all of that can be taught without the Buddhist trappings. Because, you know, the 5 hindrances. Who has not experienced craving before? Who has not experienced anger or aversion? Who has not experienced tiredness or laziness or procrastination or anxiety or doubt, self-doubt? Anyone here? Right? So these are all these Buddhist aggregates, factors of enlightenment. All of them are phenomena that each and every one of us have experienced. They're experiential. So they can be taught without the Buddhist trappings. But there's something amazing about diving into a philosophy that's been taught for thousands of years, that's been practiced by thousands and thousands of people. It's almost like you're jumping into a system that's so supportive, and you have the supportive, energetic support of all the people who've ever received benefit from doing this practice. You know, it's like all of our predecessors are holding us and saying, you can do it, I did it. You know, we read stories, we have great teachers that have gone through this path and they can give us examples. So I think there's a lot of benefit to the actual Buddhist path and all the energetic trappings that come along with it. Some of the complaints about secular mindfulness, MBSR, and there are a lot of mindfulness-based teacher programs. I'm actually a mentor in a mindfulness-based teacher training program. And there are a lot of people in this teacher training program that have not been on their first retreat yet. And to become certified MBSR, I think you only have to do 1 7-day retreat for the first level. I mean, you don't have to do a lot of intensive retreat practice. For the Buddhist path, you have to do a lot of intensive retreat practice, daily practice, to start having these liberating insights. To see the nature of all phenomena, it takes a lot of intensive commitment to quietude, to focus, to a simplistic sort of life, right? And a lot of retreats, as many as you can squeeze in during your daily life. So a lot of these MBSR, I don't know about it, you know, a lot of them may not necessarily have the intensive experience that, say, I have, or a lot of other Buddhist teachers. You know, on retreats, people with mental illness can have psychotic breaks or have intense emotional difficulties. And someone has to have a deep practice to be able to recognize and understand and help, you know, people get more grounded in their body and help them work through and get more grounded in order to get them to help. And there are now stories about people in MBSR trainings who are coming home and losing it. And not doing well. I've had a lot of people contact me and say, what am I supposed to do? My son has been suicidal and depressed since he did this mindfulness training. So there's a little bit of a gap there. I think there needs to be some more training with some of the mindfulness teachers. And, you know, therapists too. You have to be really aware of some of the dangers of mindfulness. It lacks the ethical portion in the mindfulness teaching, you know, as far as the teachings go. But I'm going to tell you that if you sit there and you're meditating every day and you've just told somebody off and you've lost it, when you sit down to meditate, you're going to feel regret or shame or anger or something. So I think that the practice teaches ethics without you learning the ethical trappings. I think meditation, mindfulness meditation teaches us to be more ethical because we notice how much we're suffering when we're not ethical. But it's nice to be taught formally all the ethics and morality practices because they help us be more mindful, right? For Buddhists who fear their practice is watered down, they fear that mindfulness is watered down, it's lukewarm version of the practice. But a lot of people get so much benefit from mindfulness, secular mindfulness, that they wouldn't have gotten because they have resistance to isms or religion. You know, they might perceive this as a religion. So I think it's very beneficial in that way. So they can learn to meditate. A lot of people don't like groups. They have resistance to groups, and so they can do this practice without having to expose themselves to a group. And a lot of people come to Buddhism from MBSR. They've done their 8-week MBSR program, heard there's a mindfulness group, and here they show up, then they start learning about Buddhism, and they're like, oh, this is supportive, okay. So, but both of them have the intention to be present with the moment, be as present with the moment, to be compassionate and kind to yourself, to let the wise self come forward, and not live from the fearful, small, contracted sense of self. Some of you know Michelle Hobby that comes here on Sundays, real sweet lady. She told us a story once, and I asked her to write it down. She says, it was in 1986, I was with a group of doctors and nurses in Haiti on a medical mission trip. Tensions were high and the turmoil related to their dictator, Papa Doc's regime. We were surrounded by guards with automatic rifles, protecting our group the first few nights. The third day we embarked on a small wooden boat carrying about 100 passengers, including some pigs and goats. We're going to the remote island of La Gonavie for 2 weeks to set up a medical clinic in a large pig pen. About an hour out on the water, another similar boat carrying the same amount of passengers ran into us. The other boat began sinking, and all the passengers, all Haitians, began jumping into our already full to capacity boat, which then began taking on water, making it start to sink. Everyone began screaming in panic. I decided, this is it. My time is up. So I grabbed some of the children in my arms and held them. I heard someone singing and turned towards the voice. One of the missionary doctors stood up at the bow and calmly began singing Amazing Grace. Soon everyone stopped screaming and panicking. And they all became silent and relaxed. The boat stopped sinking. This memory will never leave me. An example of what just one person can do. Just one person with a calm, mindful presence, singing Amazing Grace. Thank you, Michelle, for that wonderful story. There's a lot more than what I've just said. As usual. But thank you very much for your attention.